What's up, guys? Dave Duford here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic evening. It is Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and if you're just catching this, make sure you turn up your speakers and listen up, because we are ending the four-part series on final expense sales training. Specifically today, what I'm going to teach is how to rebuttal and close like a pro. So, and how to handle objections as well. So, if this is your first time, I want to welcome you to my regularly scheduled live stream on Facebook. I do this every week, right now at 9 o'clock on Wednesday. That may change shortly with the new year coming up. But every week I do a live stream training on some sort of final expense training topic. So, I want to welcome you for coming. If you are experienced and you have been on this training program before and seen it before, welcome back. It's good to have you back. I always enjoy seeing people again, and hope you do get more value out of what I have to offer and what I'm going to talk about today. So, before we get started, just wanted to throw out a little, a plug for my avatar leads as well as my book. If you haven't picked it up, I do sell and have a #1 final expense sales training book on Amazon called The Official Guide to Selling Final Expense Insurance. You can also buy it on my website. If you go under the Buy Dave's products, you'll see Buy Dave's book. And I also sell telemarketed leads called Avatar Final Expense Leads. You can find out more there. They're cheap, effective, and they turn around quick. In fact, we can turn around leads pretty quickly within about a week's period of time as of right now. So it's a great time to buy if you're interested or looking for a new lead source, or if you'd like a written version of all the training that I really talk about on my live streams as well as in my YouTube videos. The book is an excellent resource to get. So let's go ahead and get started with today's sales training program. If you have a question, please feel free to leave a question in the comment box on the video. I will check occasionally as I'm doing my sales training lecture to see what you have to say, and be more than happy to address each question that you may have. So feel free. I like to help if I can. So feel free, completely free, to ask anything, questions about anything I'm talking about right now, or even about anything at all about anything final expense. So, as discussed, we are talking about how to handle objections and close your final expense sale like a pro. As I do in every training on sales training for the presentation, I like to remind you of where you are relative to the particular topic we're talking about. So, in the 4-part series, the sales closing tactics occurs at the end. At this point, you have properly introduced yourself, you've built rapport, you've done a tremendous amount of fact-finding and pre-qualifying, and you've presented a product of what you sell, and you've positioned yourself effectively as being the only obvious solution for this person to buy, and you have their tacit verbal agreement that they will buy from you. Now, this is very important to keep in mind. If you follow the steps that I have outlined so far in the sales process, the objection handling and closing section, honest to God's truth, should be the easiest portion of the sales call. Now, why would I say that? A reason I say that is because most people flip out. They think, oh God, I have an objection. Oh, I've got to deal with this, or I've got to remember 50 different objections when it comes to selling the final expense process. And what I respond to that is this. If you experience objections, a tremendous amount of objections, now we'll get to some specifics about what objections are stalling tactics and what aren't, but if you're experiencing significant, very conditionally based objections that really maybe object to the whole concept or the price or something else, you have not done a good job with how I teach how to sell. My dad taught me this. He sold chemicals. He sold out to a very large company called Ecolab after 20 years being self-made, and he told me that essentially sales is about overcoming objections. I would clarify that further, saying that sales is all about overcoming objections before they become an objection. If you look back at the sales trainings I've done over the past couple of weeks, what we have done up to this point has specifically and intentionally eliminated objections that could come up. The most possible or most probable objections that come up when it comes to final expense. Or trust. Do they trust you? Does the price work? Is it something they can fit in their budget? Do they need what you're selling? Do they have the health? And will they allow you to bank draft it? And do they feel like, again, kind of tying back into trust, are you somebody that's worth trusting? Does the insurance you're offering make sense to them? So if you think about it, each of those things we've already overcome. We've built trust through the rapport and introduction phase, the exhibition of our knowledge and being sharp as a tack by demonstrating what insurance is out there, how we're different, showing them how we're different, not just telling. We've pre-qualified them. They're okay with the bank draft. They've got the health that qualifies. That's usually the easiest. And this is usually the hardest part of the pre-qualification phase. We've identified a need, and we've tested it against, the alternatives out there. We've asked them the tough questions. So if we take all that into consideration, and we get to the close, and we're going to ask for the business, don't you think that you have a really, really high odds of closing your prospect? If you've done all this heavy lifting prior to presenting the price and asking for the business, how much resistance are you really going to get? Very little if you got somebody and you have followed, somebody who really fits the mold and you have followed the sales presentation just like I taught it. I promise you, if you do, the objections part, the most part that every salesperson is concerned about, becomes the least important. It becomes the easiest because you've done all the heavy lifting prior to that. So most objections have been eliminated if you follow the sales process. I'm reading some notes here, so bear with me. So objections experience at this point involve the following. Now we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We're going to talk about how to close the deal, then deal with objections, but I think it's important that you understand the mentality behind the sales process as well, and really where you're at in conjunction with everything else. So when you do experience objections, which we will get into detail here in a moment, there's really two kinds of objections you're going to experience. You're going to experience a stalling type of objection, or you're going to experience a conditional type of objection. And statistically or specifically what this means, stalling objections are your, let me think about it, I need to talk to my kids. Those are high odds of closing objections. You can overcome those because behind that objection, if you will, there's more to it. There's something that you have to uncover and go a little bit deeper to uncover the real resistance. And many times you can reverse those around and get the sale. The conditional objections, I don't know if I need this. I'm not really sold on needing any insurance anyway. I don't like a bank draft. I refuse to have a bank draft. If you can't overcome those objections, and there are objections, they're really conditional to the sale to begin with, which means if they're an objection and you can't overcome it, and if you didn't take the time to try to address them earlier on, that's a very low odds that you're going to convert the person. Okay, so those are the two you're going to experience. If again, those are really the two you'll experience completely. If you're really good at following the sales presentation, this is the point I'm driving at, you'll really only experience the stalling techniques once. Once in a blue moon, you'll get the conditional stuff that is a lot harder to deal with. And most likely than not, if you're seeing and hearing those objections, and you just can't seem to get through and break through whatever issue that you're experiencing, an objection you're experiencing, the likelihood, and again, very important what I'm about to say, because this is based off of, again, years of training agents, years of helping them, ride-alongs, and all of that. The biggest problem that agents have is they don't ask the tough questions, really in the pre-qualification and fact-finding stage. So if you're seeing a lot of objections, start by asking yourself, what could I have done earlier on to try to overcome that? Because many times, my opinion is, when we deal with these objections, a lot of times they weren't ever sold to begin with. So shift back and look at your pre-qualification stage. See what you missed out on. I'll give you a perfect example before I move on. This occurred to me about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago. I was running an appointment. I thought it was smooth. Everything sounded good. I asked for the premium. As I say, I asked the premium, can you afford $80 to $100 a month? She said, no. And I said, well, how about 50 to 70? She said, yes, I think so. And I said, great. So I moved on, presented. She gave me all this wiggle room BS. She didn't give me a straight answer. And I was really frustrated because I felt like she was dancing around me and just not being straightforward. So I left the sale without a sale. And I was thinking about it, and I realized where I had lost her, because she had had some issues over the pricing, and I tried to sell her on something is better than nothing close, which I'll get to at the end. That's a very important rebuttal tactic to try to close something that's just not panning out necessarily perfectly. I realized that she did not even truly commit to the premium. If you think about it, what I said was, she said, when I said, can you afford 50 to 70 a month? She said, yes, I think I can. Well, I think I can is really exhibiting some sort of unsureness. They're not 100% sure if they really can't afford what it is that you're presenting. So what that means is that it's a no. Because in that section, if you remember, I specifically say you must get a 100% confirmation that they can afford it. Yes, with sincerity. Because then you can, in a sense, hold that against them when it comes down to the close and say, hey, you said this would work. What's the problem? So the point is that I never got that. And I got all mired up in all this crap at the end when I realized that I didn't tie her down and really get hard and nail heavy on that particular premium question. So I lost the sale. Maybe I could have saved it if I had preempted it to some extent. So that's the point. I realized that, and that's how most agents are as well. They don't ask the tough questions, and they get these objections at the end because they didn't really cover them. Okay, so we've talked about objections. We're going to shift gears back to what happens after we ask the trial close. If we remember in our pre-qualification video, I say basically which one of these works best. They say, I like your plan, and why do you like it? And they tell you why, and then I say, that's what everybody says because they like first day coverage, never cancels, blah, blah, blah. So now we're there. They've got them conceptually closed on the sale. So at this point, I say, now give me a couple minutes. I'm going to run some rates. I kind of know what to expect in the back of my mind, and you should too after doing this long enough. And let me kind of look at and compare some options. Maybe you're not 100% sure health-wise where they're going to fit. So you're going to pull some rates out and look at some companies and kind of compare what's out there. I like physically doing this anyway, even if I have a good idea what mine I'm going to use, because it shows visually that I'm not just grabbing something and handing it to them. I'm working, in a sense, right, to look at the different options, compare, think. I've got visually, you can see my face, I'm studying this. I'm working hard for the customer. So hopefully that shows, and hopefully that creates some kind of bond. I don't think it's super necessary, but I always did that just kind of as a little ploy, I guess, to get them interested and engaged that I'm doing my job. And to an extent, that was true, especially in the beginning as I'm comparing rates and coverage. So once I find the plan, here's how I go into presenting it. So I showed them the brochure and I say, Mrs. Jones, this is ABC Life Insurance Company. I explain a little bit about the company, and then remind them what it does, and I explain why I'm selecting this company. It's very important to understand the reason why we're getting ABC Company instead of XYZ Company. So it sounds something like this. I say, the reason I'm selecting ABC Company is because, first of all, let me step back. So this is ABC Life Insurance Company. They're out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They've been in business since 1933. They're an A-ranked AM Best company. And the reason I'm selecting this company over all the other companies I have is because, bottom line, despite your COPD, your insulin that you have, your cancer a year and a half ago, you have atrial fibrillation, and you use a wheelchair constantly. Oh, and you're bipolar and schizophrenic. Despite all that, I can still get you first day full coverage. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we had a carrier like that? So I explain to them, and I remind them, hey, look, you got all these issues. And this carrier, out of all the other options, is the best overall to get you the best quality and the best pricing combined together. So I remind them why. Very important. You never want to skip over that reason. You always want to explain why we're doing what we're doing. Again, we're eliciting and making sure we're getting buy-in at all steps of the phase. And so I kind of know at this point where the rates are. I've even written them down on a page. We know that, let's say they can afford 60 to 80 a month. I write the 60, 70, and 80 down. Or I'll give you some other options here in a minute. But at this point, I got an idea. Get the prices down. Next step to this part is to review the health questions word for word on the application. So what I mean by that is that I say, okay, well, before I write this up, I want to make sure we can actually qualify. I'm going to just double check, make sure everything's fine. I'm going to read you the questions on the application. Do not skip over this, okay? A lot of sales are lost because people will call up, do a phone interview, and they get declined, and the person's pissed off because you've already sold hard how great this company is, but you forgot that the person takes nitroglycerin and can't be placed with X company. So you don't want to skip over that. You want to go through each question and just ask them for a yes or no and anything like that, and just to make sure that they're on board health-wise to minimize the problems of rate ups or declines on the phone. So make sure you go through that. And then so everything looks good, I'll say, look, everything looks fine, perfect, just like I thought. So let me show you exactly what we can price out and what you can show you. So I'm using here a sample of a clean sheet of paper. What you want to do is write at the top, you want to write the face amount, and I'm doing this live on the spot. The face amount for 3 different options. Kind of think good, better, best, right? You don't want to have 5, 6, 7, 8 options. Too many options is always a bad thing. It leads to people being more confused. And when people are confused, they don't make decisions. They just wait. So make it simple. 2 or 3 is fine. And then all you need to do is write the face amount and then write the premium amount. So I'm going to write down the premium. There's a few more things here before I actually show you what I've done here in a crappy handwriting. So here's how the presentation goes. So I'll say, all right, Mrs. Jones, so everything looks good. Looks like you're going to qualify for you. Let me show you the pricings that I have for you. So let me show you here how this would look up here. Hopefully you guys can see this. I'm going to try to get it focused, so just bear with me. Oh, perfect. Yeah, you guys can see that. Great. So what I've done here is I've got 10, 12 and a half, 15, and then a made-up premium. There's no rhyme or reason in any of this. It's just something I've made up. I like to add the dot and the double zeros to make it look bigger. I know that sounds corny, but I heard somebody say that once. I thought, yeah, hey, look, it takes up more real estate on paper. It looks more effective. And then I write the premiums down. So what I say at that point is this. I say, look, let me show you some prices, Mrs. Jones. It looks like everything looks good. You're going to qualify. Let me show you some prices that, based on what you told me, you can qualify for. So let me show you. Here's a paper. So, and I get beside him saying, based on what you told me, you want to get a burial, you want to be buried, you want to leave a little extra money behind, you want to leave a lot, but you want to leave something behind. I've written down a $10,000, a $12,500, and a $15,000. You'll find below that the premium range fits the range you told me you were comfortable with. And here's the thing. Mrs. Jones, my recommendation is to pick the plan that best fits your budget. Okay? Get the one, all of these are going to do the job. Okay? But my recommendation is to pick the plan that's going to be the easiest to afford and is going to accomplish the goal that you want. So out of these 3 options, Mrs. Jones, which one works best for you? And then shut up. So at this point, what you've done now is you've presented the options, you've reminded them what this is going to do and why you're selecting these options. It's very important that you actually take the time to say, look, I'm showing you these options because you told me you want to be buried and you wanted a little left over, and we both agreed 10,000 is a good number to start with. So I took a 10, 12 and a half, and 15, and I showed you some prices which ended up being in the same range that you were comfortable with. So I'm showing this stuff, and I always think about this anyway. My whole presentation is, I'm the consultant, I guess you could say, and you're telling me what you want, and I'm showing you what you want. And I'm going to recommend the one that fits your budget best. So this is important. When I get to the close, you want to, again, you're taking the role of a professional advisor. You want to make recommendations, okay? And when I look at one of these, because I've been in this business long enough, I am most sensitive to making sure that a client gets something they can afford. I know I can go back and see these people a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line and sell them some more insurance, okay? So I don't need to necessarily sell them it all up front, especially if they don't have a policy and they're getting used to paying a new premium. I don't want to overload it and sell too hard and be too effective, because then they'll take out a big bite, wake up the next morning and say, hell, I can't afford that. I got to pay for my beer and liquor. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the stuff that goes through these people's minds. So I will recommend professionally to pick the one that's going to do the job that they want to accomplish, because people keep insurance that meets the needs of what it is they want. Not everybody goes out there and buys a profound amount of insurance and just because they want it. They do it because they need it. and they want to protect their family and have peace of mind. So I always make my recommendation based around budget and need. If they want if in our conversation the area is pricing for burials, they say they've seen 10,000, I'll agree with them. I'll say that's why I showed you 10,000. My recommendation is at least to pick the 10,000. If you can afford the higher amounts, go for it. But hey, if you just get the 10 or any of these, you're in good hands. So please, my question to you is pick which one works best for you. And that's my close, is which one works best for you. So after I ask the question, and again, this is all I'm showing them. Now you could show it to them on a lead card. It's better with a crisp, clear piece of paper because it's not going to have distracting stuff on it. Straight to the point. They can look exactly what it is that you're doing. If you do that, once you offer the premium, be quiet. This is where you got to be quiet and not interrupt them. The old saying is, the one who speaks first loses. So you got to make sure that you give them time to mull it over mentally or talk to their husband about it as you wait for them to come up with a decision. So I've been in situations where I've been quiet for minutes that felt like hours. If that's what it takes, shut up and wait that long. Just think about something else. And let them mull it over and get to the point where they make a decision. So let's assume they make a decision. We'll get back to some of the rebuttal objections that you'll experience. So let's say they pick, I want the 10,000. Great. So at this point, once they selected the plan, say, that's perfect. I think that makes really good sense, Mr. Jones. And my next question is, who do you want your beneficiary to be? So once they select it, we're going right into the application. We're going to write down who do they want as a beneficiary. So we're taking the conversation from the pain of coming off of money to the visual imagination of which person do they love enough that they're really concerned about to have this money. So it's kind of an emotional shift. It gets them off the money to the main benefit of this policy. Who's going to benefit from this? The beneficiary. And so from there, we fill out the bennies, and then we go through the application and fill it out in entirety. And really at that point, you get signatures, you get everything filled out. Try to fill out everything you can in the home. Try to scan your application once or twice, of course, before you leave. You don't want to screw up the apps. That's where a lot of agents lose a lot of money, is they're just too non-detail oriented to make sure that they got everything covered. So you want to, one call closes in its truest form, you've got to do the paperwork right. Why it pays the right carriers that have minimal paperwork. So what happens at this point? Many of these carriers you guys are writing, it's the same as me, have a phone interview. So what I want to shift to is, well, how do you prepare your client for a phone interview? So the first thing I'll suggest to you is you want to explain to them what to expect. I'm big on that. Hopefully you can see that. So when you write everything up and sign up, you say, look, so the next step before I go, what's cool about this, you always spin these like, oh gosh, got to be on the phone for 15 minutes, these objections in your mind, you always spin them into a advantage. Hey, before you leave, Mr. Prospect, we're going to do a quick phone interview. They're going to pull your medical records, and what's cool about it is if everything checks out, they're going to approve you on the spot. And if they don't, then hey, we've got other options to look at. But the point is before I leave, before I go, you know you got coverage. Okay, so here's how it works. I'm going to call the company up. They're going to give me, I'm going to give them your information, my information. Once they're done with me, they'll speak with you, ask your permission to check your health history. Then they're going to ask the same exact questions I did right to you. All you need to do is listen to the question and answer yes or no. Hopefully just no, because we've already covered it. They'll probably ask you some questions about prescriptions at the end. So make sure you keep that handy and listen to what they're asking. And then at the very end, about 10, 15 minutes later, you're going to get them approval. So, and that's it. Any questions about that? Perfect. And so just go ahead and start the process at that point. So again, tell them what to expect. Some of these people are nervous. They're scared. I've had people shaking in their boots doing phone interviews. They're just not, they feel like they're under pressure. So the more you tell them, the more you let them know it's not a big deal and say it's easy. You want to say this is an easy thing. It's no big deal. It's real quick. Use words that express that it's low key, that it's, hey, everybody does it. It's okay, no big deal, because that'll help lower their defenses and get the job done. So make sure you do that. Point number 5, once you do that, let's say they get approved, I always recommend leaving a brochure behind. Some agents don't do that because they don't want Joe Schmo, the other guy, walking in the door a month later and saying, that company's not a real insurance company. They're out of Canada or whatever. they're a fraternal or some crap. So they don't do anything, and they just say, if you need anything, call me. I like to operate on the concept of transparency. I want to have listed down in writing with a brochure that makes it real, what they have, how much it costs, what it does, what the advantages are. It's all in writing, the basic overview, meat and potatoes look at the policy, so that they have that handy. And they've got something physical that they feel and can look at. And if the Joe Blow guy comes in, they can say, yeah, I got this and this and that, and that's no big deal. So take your brochure, just like imagine brochure here, write everything down. Mrs. Jones whole life policy. I always put whole life policy. Don't just say Mrs. Jones policy, because Joe Schmo, the agent, will come in and say, well, that's probably a term insurance. This is a term. They'll say all sorts of crap. And then you want your rate to be down, and you want to write out on the side, rate never increases, because Joe Blow, the agent, will come in and say, well, ma'am, that may be term. It doesn't say it doesn't go up. They'll use every angle they can. They're salespeople. What do you expect? Then you say the coverage. If it's day one, you say the coverage is X amount, and it's first day full coverage from the first payment. So then that tells you again, well, Mr. Jones, you have COPD. It's probably a 2-year waiting period or something crazy like that. Again, this is what's going through an agent's mind that's trying to punch out your deal. And then the last one is first day, or it can't be canceled because of age or health. You want to write that down, so again, to prevent the term argument or disagreement from that agent to try to scare your prospect. So I like to leave leave behinds and brochures, because I think it's defense against the guys out there that are going to try to knock you out. So once you do that, the last step I highly suggest is the cool down phase. That's where I learned this from Tim Wenders. I mentioned him in another video. 2010, 2011, guy wrote in excess of $400,000 in final expense business each consecutive year. Had an average case size of $1,000. Just a killer agent. The average in this business is 600. So he advocated the cool down, which is just talk about anything other than final expense for 5 minutes. And his concept behind doing that is people don't remember facts as much as they remember emotions. So when you leave, they're going to remember that guy's a nice guy. He's a good guy. He really cared. He's likable. And they won't remember all the details of minutia. They may remember 10% of what we told them. But what they will remember emotionally is that guy was cool. He was nice. He really cared about me. And you'll find that ultimately that makes a huge impact. So talk about anything. It doesn't matter. Just not about insurance. That's kind of the key thing. Okay, cool. I'm going to check on my Facebook page here, guys, see if there's any questions before I get into the objection handling section. So just bear with me 1 second. Thank you guys so far for joining the stream here. It's good to have you. All right, let's see here. I got one comment from Chris. Hey, Dave, you sell the premium today. Awesome. On a non-replacement case, and it seemed to work well. Great. Chris, if you're listening to this, type this out. I'm curious. What premium did you start with? Did you start with the biggest one that you could? Or did you match the premium more in line with their need? It's not really, there's no right or wrong. I'm just curious to see how you did it and what the response was. So for you guys that don't know what sell the premium is, it's the concept of actually, most agents present a face amount at the very end. They don't really talk about premium at all. So they mention a face amount, 10, 15, and 20. And what happens is a lot of objections over price occur, and they just can't afford the price. And sometimes the face doesn't actually match up with what it is that they want to accomplish. So what I do is I match the premium to what it is that I'm going to sell them in face amounts. So what I mean by that is, earlier in the presentation, this is in the pre-qualification video. If you go scroll down my news feed here, you'll find it. And I say, look, most important thing for me is to get you a plan you can afford. Don't want you dropping it 6 months. If I can find you a plan that you can afford, fits your budget, with somewhere between $75 to $100 a month work. And then they either say yes or no. And so before we even present the product, we know we've got at least a premium commitment. It's huge, because that's one of the biggest objections that people have. So when we present the face amounts, we can justify our presentation based on what they say they could afford. So it makes a huge difference. So that's sell the premium. It allows you to establish earlier on if this person even has a budget to buy and they're engaged in the process of buying. So it's very important to me. I teach all my agents to do this, and I highly recommend the process as well. So Chris adds here, Miss Prospect, can you afford 75 to 100? So he started 75 to 100. And then she said no. Okay, how about somewhere between 50 to 75? And yes, so they committed to that. And then so you show two options. One other thing you can do, I forgot to add this. You can show two price ranges in that range, like a 50, like a 55 and a 65, and then like an 80 or something. You can show one that's a little bit higher to try to go for the higher if you want to. I don't do that personally just because I just want to make the prospect a customer. Like I said earlier, I can come back and sell more insurance to this person if they want to buy. I just want to make them buy from me. And I want to make sure it sticks on the books. That's just as important. I don't want to buy a big plan just to lapse because I pushed hard for that extra couple of premium dollars. So Chris has all this in the comment section if you're watching this on Facebook. It works very well. Again, I think it just eliminates a lot of the price objections that you run across because they tell you that they can't afford it. It's incredible, and they tell you that before you actually even describe what you do. That's what's crazy about it. So, okay. If you guys got any other questions, feel free to add here. But what I'm going to continue to do here is talk about the 4-step objection handling process. So, even if you do a perfect presentation, you're going to get objections. Nobody's perfect. We deal with objections, and we got the two kinds. We've got the stalling tactics as well as the conditional stuff. What we'll most likely talk about is more of these, I would call them stalling tactics. And namely, let me think about it, some form of variant of that, and then let me talk to my kids about it. Those are probably, when you get good at presenting, those are the most common. You know, if you're hearing price objections or need objections, please go back and watch the pre-qualification video further down on my news feed. That's tremendously helpful in helping you cover that stuff earlier on to figure out if they're even qualified prospects at all. So let's say, hey, it looks good. Give me the weekend to think about it. I need to think about it, pray about it, whatever it is that they say. So there's 4 steps to handling this objection. And on top of that, there's 4 steps to handling any of these objections that you'll experience. So I'm going to give you the steps, and then I'm going to actually go through the process. The first step is to disarm the person. The second step is to ask, how do you mean? The third step is to isolate that objection. Make sure there's no other objections. And fourth is the trial close on an if-then basis. So let me put this into action so you can see how it sounds. So Miss Jones says, hey, let me think about this. I'm not sure, whatever. They just add, give me some time to think about this. I'll tell them, first step, disarm. That is completely fine, Mrs. Prospect. Not a problem at all. And I'm looking straight in their eyes. I lower my voice, and I put my hands up like this. This is defensive posture. So, Mrs. Jones, that is totally fine. I could totally understand why you maybe need to think about it. But I have a question for you. When you say you need to think about it, here's number 2, step 2. How do you mean? So, and then you shut up. So what happens is that when you say that, when you say, how do you mean, it's an open-ended question. And again, what it allows you to do is to dig deeper, because there's always I can't remember the term for it, but there's always a smoke screen, okay? The first thing's a smoke screen. The real objection's always a layer or 2 deeper, and you've got to work at it in a polite manner to get to that next layer. This gets you to the second layer. And so what they'll say a lot of times is, well, I don't know if I can afford it. So they're going back on the pricing. Or, I don't know if I need it. Or I don't know if it's, I just need to think about it. Or something else there. Maybe they're price shopping. Maybe they're lying to you, as I'll get to in a second. But so let's say they give you something. And usually, I tell you guys, 8 out of 10 times it's pricing. Well, I don't know. I can't really afford this now. I can afford this. I can definitely afford this premium, but not this month, not next month. I got Christmas presents. So then I'll say, okay, so just to make sure, you're telling me you like everything you see, it makes sense, but the pricing to pay today or even next month is not going to work for you. Is that correct? So they'll say yes, and then I'll ask them, besides that, is there any other reason, besides pricing, that would prevent you from doing business with me today, or prevent you from taking a policy from me today? So this is the isolation of the objection. This step allows you to make sure that this is the only thing preventing us from doing business. They'll usually say yes. There's usually not a whole bunch of issues. It's that one thing. And then what you say after that is a trial close, where you say, Mrs. Jones, let me just propose something to you. Here's a proposition. Let's say I can get you a plan with a lower premium, and we can actually get a better price, and maybe we could even start it a month later. Would we be able to do business if that's the case? Is this something you could commit to today if we could set it up to where it's a little more advantageous price-wise? If they say yes, boom, you're right on the track where you need to be, and now you've got this thing isolated. And the bottom line is you can proceed forward and show them a smaller premium, and then get into the something is better than nothing close, which let me go ahead and just jump into, which is this. Bottom line, Mrs. Jones, I totally understand why you're hesitant on pricing. Like I said from the beginning, I don't want you to take out more than you can chew. So here's my proposition to you. Why don't we go ahead, instead of starting with the $50, it's $10,000, why don't we just start with $5,000? That's $25 a month, whatever it is. Here's the thing. You got to have something on the books. You obviously sent this card in for something, right? You know you need insurance. You're telling me all this. You just saw your husband die, and you're still paying on it. You know you need insurance. But you also know you got to balance your budget and make sure it's affordable. So why don't we start with the $5,000? It's $25 a month. We can start it next month or the following month. But the bottom line is something is better than nothing, right? You can always add more to this later. That's what most people do anyway. But I think at the end of the day, if you just have something, you're going to get the peace of mind you want, and you'll be happy. What's your thoughts on that? Or can we move forward with that? However level of aggressiveness, that's not even that aggressive, but you get the point. And so that turns it around, allows you to catch something out of it if there is an objection there. If that doesn't work, if they're still wrestling with you, then try the free look close. At that point, I don't like doing the free look close because it just basically says, you got 30 days to tell me no. Basically, it says, look, why don't we just take it out? If they're just beating around the bush, take it out. We'll set it up the following month. You got 30 days to look at it. If you don't want it, call me back. I'll cancel it. That's the last-ditch effort I'll do. It probably works half the time.